If you would, open up your Bibles to 1 Samuel chapter 14. 1 Samuel 14. If you by chance recall, or maybe it is you took some notes down or have them in your Bible, but the last lesson was titled Saul's Foolish Sin. And now we have a foolish vow. And so, there's a lot to talk about with Saul, but typically it ends in foolishness. It just really does. You don't see very much from him in a positive way. And so this is going to be the same thing. Look at 1 Samuel 14 with me. We're going to cover some very important circumstances here in with the fighting of the Philistines, and specifically with Jonathan. Jonathan's going to play a major role in these things. And so let's look at 1 Samuel 14 together. There's a lot of verses here, but don't get scared. We're not going to spend a ton of time on each individual verse here. But let's start here at verse 1. Now it fell upon a day that Jonathan, the son of Saul, said unto the young man that bears armor, Come, let us go over to the Philistines' garrison that is on yonder side. But he told not his father, and Saul abode in the uttermost part of Gibeah under the pomegranate tree, which is in Migron. And the people that were with him were about 600 men. And Ahijah, the son of Ahitub, Ichabod's brother, the son of Phinehas, the son of Eli, the priest of Jehovah in Shiloh, wearing an ephod, and the people knew not that Jonathan was gone. And between the passes by which Jonathan sought to go over unto the Philistines' garrison, there was a rocky crag on the one side, and a rocky crag on the other side. And the name of the one was Bozez, and the name of the other was Sinah. The one crag rose up in the north in front of Michmash, and the other in the south in front of Geba. And Jonathan said to the young man that bears armor, Come and let's go over unto the garrison of these uncircumcised. It may be that Jehovah will work for us. For there is no restraint to Jehovah to save by many or by few. And his armor-bearer said unto him, Do all that is in thy heart, and turn thee. Behold, I am with thee according to thy heart. Then said Jonathan, Behold, we will pass over unto the men, and we will disclose ourselves unto them. If they say thus unto us, Tarry until we come to you, then we will stand still in our place, and will not go up unto them. But if they say thus, Come up unto us, then we will go up, for Jehovah hath delivered them into our hand, and this shall be the sign unto us. And both of them disclosed themselves unto the garrison of the Philistines. And the Philistines said, Behold, the Hebrews come forth out of the holes where they had hid themselves. And the man of the garrison answered Jonathan and his armor-bearer, and said, Come up to us, and we will show you a thing. And Jonathan said unto his armor-bearer, Come after me, for Jehovah hath delivered them into the hand of Israel. And Jonathan climbed up upon his hands and upon his feet, his armor-bearer after him, and they fell before Jonathan, and his armor-bearer slew them after him. And that first slaughter which Jonathan and his armor-bearer made was about 20 men. Within it were a half furrow's length and an acre of land. Let's just take a stop right there for just a second. This kind of mixes into a couple of different things here, but you have Jonathan fighting the Philistines, and so let's discuss what's going on here. First of all, you see in verse 1, he doesn't tell his father at all. Probably, I would think that just given the circumstances of what we've seen in the short past here, that Saul's probably afraid, and that if he asked for permission, then he would have said no because Saul is afraid. Well, verse 6, we see that Jonathan's saying, Look, we should go over, and it might be that God's going to be with us. And if that's the case, then we can go on and fight. This is an interesting thing. When you see this, it says, God can save by many or by a few. It really doesn't matter. If you're on the side of God, God can do pretty amazing things. And so look at Jonathan's faith in comparison to that of his father. His father was turning tail and retreating last week that we saw. And yet, you don't see the same thing with Jonathan. They could have been walking into great danger and said, God might be on our side here, and so let's go find out. Let's go find out if God's on our side. So as armor bearer, this is another, I think, really important thing, and showing an interesting dichotomy between Saul and Jonathan and their leadership style. Saul has no leadership, but Jonathan incites people to want to follow him. And his armor bearer, what does he do? He says, hey, you know what? Verse 7, his armor bearer says, whatever you want to do, I'm with you. I am with you. And so that contrasts really interestingly between him and his father. Now, verses 8 and 10, they talk about yelling out. Verses 8 and 10 says, behold, we'll pass over unto them, and we'll disclose ourselves to them. If they say thus unto us, tarry until we come to you. And then the next one says that, them being called up to them. Some people have kind of asked, what is going on here? Isn't this only two real options here that's being called out? Is he going to say, I'm going to stand here and then let them come to him, and that's showing that Jehovah is on their side? Or is it the fact that, they're calling him up and that's showing Jehovah's on their side? Really, it's either one. Doesn't matter which one it is. Jehovah is with them. And so what is going on is that, really, when you think about this is not what you'd want to do in any sort of military application. They are giving up the element of surprise. They basically come up and they say, hey, we're right here, and eliminating all that surprise. And then he says, if they give us any of these two responses, we know that God's on our side. Now, could there have been any other response here? That's the question I have. Could there have been any other response? They could have called out and these things not happen. They could have just rushed at them. They could have called out something else. But in the end, what you see is they say, hey, this is kind of a funny statement when you think about it. In verse 12, they basically say, hey, why don't you come over here and we'll teach you a thing or two. And so Jonathan goes, this is our point. This is it. God is on our side. And so they're going to go up. Now, verse 11 is kind of funny when you think about the context of this, but they're taunting. They're taunting the Hebrews here because remember back in chapter 13 and verse 6 how they went and they hid themselves in holes and caves and amongst the rocks, and the Philistines are taunting them, saying, hey, look, the Hebrews, they've come out of their holes here. Look at them. Look at, and so they're just kind of making fun of them here. But Jonathan gets the answer that he wants. And so they go to fight in verse 13. And this is, I was looking into this because I've read over this a few times, and I go, I don't really know exactly what is going on here because the armor bearer is evidently fighting too. I'm going to give you my best case scenario here according to my studies. But what it looks like here is all these people are coming just almost in single file line. They're all rushing at Jonathan. Jonathan is cutting them down, and his armor bearer comes in behind them and makes sure that they're dead. That's what it looks like is going on. But they go and they fight, and they fight and they kill 20 men. So you think about that. Verse 14, going back, I think it was verse 6 or 7 where it said this, but you've got 2 men that are fighting against many more men, and they kill 20. Listen, we're not talking having a superior weapon. They've got the same weapons here. It's not that, this is not some kind of an action movie where, there's a guy and he's just shooting right down the row and just taking everybody out. No, this is manly one-on-one combat, and these guys take down 20 men. Now, I don't tell you, I would hate to see one person in a dark alley, much less 2. But can you imagine 20 people? You'd be running at 20 people, and Jonathan doesn't. Jonathan goes and he fights. And so it mentions some things here in verse 15. It says there are trembling in the camp and in the field, and among all the people, the garrison, the spoilers, they also trembled, and the earth quaked. So there was an exceeding great trembling. And whether or not this is the earth quaking from God, I really doubt it, but I guess that could be it. But probably what is the case here is that this is a great quaking caused by the people, caused by commotion. This is mentioned several times in Scripture. Battle does this, 2 Kings 7:6. And God has in the past tormented the Philistines in this very way, 1 Samuel 7:10. We've already covered that. But all this commotion causes people to look. And that's where we come up to this next thing. Look at Saul's investigation of the matter. Start in verse 16 there. It says, the watchmen of Saul and Gibeon of Benjamin looked, and behold, the multitude melted away, and they went hither and thither. Then said Saul unto the people that were with him, number now, and see who is gone from us. And when they had numbered, behold, Jonathan and his armor-bearer were not there. And Saul said unto Ahijah, bring hither the ark of God, for the ark of God was there at the time with the children of Israel. And it came to pass, while Saul talked unto the priests, that the tumult that was in the camp, the Philistines, went on and increased. And Saul said unto the priests, withdraw thy hand. And Saul and all the people that were with him were gathered together and came to battle. And behold, every man's sword was against his fellow, and there was a very great discomfiture. Now the Hebrews that were with the Philistines as before time, and that went up with them into the camp from the country round about, even they also turned to be with the Israelites that were with Saul and Jonathan. Likewise, all the men of Israel that hid themselves in the hill country of Ephraim, when they heard the Philistines fled, even they also followed hard after them in the battle. All right, so looking at some things, I don't know, I guess something happened with the PowerPoint, but no worries. We're still verses 16 through 23 here. When you look at all this, Saul starts to investigate what is going on. And he goes, and there's several things that happen here. But they don't know what's going on. They have no clue what's happening. And then they go to investigate. When they go, they find that all of the weapons that were with these men are just lying there with the bodies. Now, it causes them to be a little uneasy about the situation. It says that they were discomforted. So what's the reason behind this? Because you look at verse 20, all the weapons were laying there from battle. Now, this doesn't spell anything out, but I want to make this point, because remember back in 1 Samuel 13 and verse 22, it says, so it came to pass in day of battle that there was neither sword nor spear found in the hand of any of the people that were with Saul and Jonathan, but with Saul and with Jonathan his son was there found. So nobody has a sword. Nobody does. Everybody's got, basically pitchforks and stuff. Nobody has a sword except for Saul and Jonathan. Now, what do you have? They come out and they see, and there's 20 swords laying on the ground. Now, you can think back to various wars. I believe it was World War I, where they had the Russians had a very good gun, and it would fire, in the water, it would fire anyway. So anybody that, when they saw someone that had died, somebody had died and they had that weapon, you know what they did? They dropped theirs and picked that one up, because that was a more reliable weapon, and so that's what they did. Now, you think about this, they have no weapons really. They have just some makeshift weapons, if you will. And here's a gift of 20 swords. Now, I want to make sure that we understand this. This is going to pursue into battle. And what happens here is, this is how they get their weapons. They don't have any weapons before today, except for Saul and Jonathan. Jonathan goes and he takes care of getting 20 of them for them, and then as they are taking people down, evidently they're picking up these weapons. I mean, that only makes sense, right? They're going and they're continuing to fight. with the weapons. But you can think about this too. Why are they upset by this? Why are they uneasy about this situation? Well, you just kind of think about this for a second. They come up and there's all these Philistines dead. And so they are dismayed here. So their enemies are dead. But here's the next question. Why are they dead? I mean, what else is going on here? Do you have more enemies? That's a good question. Is this some kind of a trap? Are these men dead, or do they just look dead? What's going on? There could have been any really number of things that someone could say here. But verse 21, everyone joins in the fight, even the people that you see before that were hiding in fear. All of a sudden, everybody is fighting. All right. Look at verse 24 through 46 with me. This is Saul's foolish vow. You're probably very familiar with this. And the men of Israel were distressed that day, for Saul had adjured the people, saying, "Cursed be the man that eateth any food until it be evening, and I be avenged on mine enemies." So none of the people tasted food. Now, let me stop right here. What is he doing? He's just kind of given this, it's a rash vow for sure. But he's just kind of speaking off the top of his head. No, maybe he's mad. Hey, well, you know what? We're not going to let these people live. So nobody eats until it's done. You've probably heard phrases like this in books and movies and things like that. Nobody sleeps until we find this guy. Do people sleep? Yeah, they sleep, So that's the same thought process here, except this is the king's command. And if you don't obey it, then it says cursed be. But the idea is you're going to die if you do not hold on to this command. So nobody is to eat until all the enemies are destroyed. So this is the foolish vow. Verse 25, and all the people came into the forest, and there was honey upon the ground. And when the people were come unto the forest, behold, the honey dropped, but no man put his hand to his mouth, for the people feared the oath. But Jonathan heard not when his father charged the people with the oath. Wherefore he put forth the end of the rod that was in his hand, and dipped it in the honeycomb, and put his hand to his mouth, and his eyes were enlightened. Then answered one of the people and said, Thy father straitly charged the people with an oath, saying, Cursed be the man that eateth food this day. And the people were faint. And then said Jonathan, My father hath troubled the land. See, I pray you, how mine eyes have been enlightened, because I tasted a little of this honey. How much more if haply the people had eaten freely today of the spoil of their enemies, which they found? For now hath there been no great slaughter among the Philistines. And they smote of the Philistines that day from Michmash to Ajalon. Ajalon, the people were very faint, and the people flew upon the spoil and took sheep and oxen and calves and slew them on the ground, and the people did eat with the blood. Now, verse 33, then they told Saul, saying, Behold, the people sin against Jehovah, and that they eat with the blood. And he said, Ye have dealt treacherously. Roll a great stone unto me this day. And Saul said, Disperse yourselves among the people, and say unto them, Bring me hither every man his ox, every man his sheep, and slay them here and eat, and sin not against Jehovah in eating with the blood. And all the people brought every man his ox with him that night, and slew them there. And Saul built an altar unto Jehovah. The same was the first altar that he built unto Jehovah. And Saul said, Let us go down after the Philistines by night, and take spoil among them until the morning light, and let us not leave a man of them. And they said, Do whatsoever seemeth good unto thee. Then said the priest, Let us draw near hither unto God. And Saul asked counsel of God, Shall I go down after the Philistines? Wilt thou deliver them into the hand of Israel? But he answered him not that day. And Saul said, Draw nigh hither, all ye chiefs of the people, and know and see wherein this sin hath been this day. For as Jehovah liveth, who saveth Israel, though it be in Jonathan my son, he shall surely die. But there was not a man among all the people that answered him. Then said he unto all Israel, Be ye on one side, and I and Jonathan my son will be on the other side. The people said unto Saul, Do what seemeth good unto thee. Therefore Saul said unto Jehovah, The God of Israel, show the right. And Jonathan and Saul were taken by a lot, but the people escaped. And Saul said, Cast lots between me and Jonathan my son. And Jonathan was taken. Then said to Jonathan, Tell me what thou hast done. And Jonathan told him and said, I did certainly taste a little honey with the end of the rod that was in my hand, and lo, I must die. And Saul said, God do so, and more also, for thou shalt surely die, Jonathan. And the people said unto Saul, Shall Jonathan die, who hath wrought this great salvation in Israel? Far from it, as Jehovah liveth, there shall not one hair of his head fall to the ground, for he hath wrought with God this day. So the people rescued Jonathan, that he died not. Then Saul went up from following the Philistines, and the Philistines went to their own place. So a lot of things to cover in this section. But nobody was to eat until all the enemies are destroyed. And then, of course, verses 25 and 26, when you read this, I think all you can think of is there's a land flowing with milk and honey. And this is what it looks like. You got this honey, and it is dripping off onto the ground. There's so much of it here. And so Jonathan, of course, he's now met up with the army. Or actually, the army's met up with him now. And they're all together, and he sees the honey, and he goes ahead and he tastes it, and he's fine. He feels rejuvenated from it. It says that his eyes were enlightened, and so he gets some energy from it. And then the people go, "Oh no! Your dad said not to do that." And he said that we gotta not eat anything until the job is done. Now, and verses 27 and 28 show that. Verse 29 and 30. Jonathan calls out and says, he calls his dad out on this. This is an unwise decision. How much more effective could we have been if everybody had been able to eat and not feel weakened at this point? And so verses 31 through 35, you get into what is a disgusting part in Scripture. They go and they start eating the animals. Once they've defeated everybody that they're supposed to, they go off and they find all the oxen, and they're killing them. But they're so hungry that they're just eating them raw. And there's some different thoughts here, but they're eating. Nonetheless, they're eating the blood with the meat in some sort of way. But we know this to be wrong from several passages. Genesis 9 verse 4, But the flesh with the life thereof, which is the blood thereof, shall ye not eat. So when you're cooking, don't have any of this. You can't eat anything with the blood. And you kind of get into some of this. There's some pretty gross things that that Gentiles would do with this. And I won't get into that for your stomach's sake, but there's some other things that they would do in cooking with the blood. Leviticus 7, verse 26-27, Ye shall eat no manner of blood, whether it be of bird or beast, in any of your dwellings, whosoever it be, that eateth any blood, that soul shall be cut off from his people. And then Deuteronomy 12, 23 and 24, Only be sure that thou eat not the blood, for the blood is the life, and thou shalt not eat the life with the flesh. Thou shalt not eat it, thou shalt pour it out upon the earth as water. And so, Saul, he's, the idea here behind this is that he sets up an altar. They're going to cook these things now. And it says even that this is the first altar that he puts up. Now, verses 36 through 38, Saul wants to fight more, but when he inquires of God, God doesn't talk to him. God's not going to grant him victory. You go back to AI and some of the things that they learned there, and it looks like some people remember these things, and so they go, hey, you know what? You need to ask God if he's going to be on your side before we start this fight. Now, so Saul, he gives another rash vow here. Verse 39, Saul assumes that the people had sinned, and so he says, you know what? We're gonna basically we're going to cast lots here and see who is on which side. And Saul gives a rash vow. Whoever is guilty of this is going to die. Whoever disobeyed my commandment is going to die. Even, he says, even if it is my own son. Doesn't even give any thought to this. Now, okay, granted, I want to throw this out. Granted, when the king says something, you do it, okay? The king says it, you do it. That's supposed to be it. But when the king says something foolish, you still have to do it. But, this is not going outside of God's command. That would be different. If it went outside of God's command, then yeah, they wouldn't follow the king in that regard. But this does not go outside God's command. This is an extra thing, and so you obey it. They were to obey it. And Jonathan here doesn't know about it. Now, I've often brought this up, and I mention things like this from time to time, but we all understand police officers. If you get pulled over and you've been speeding, you're going to get a ticket. What happens if you go, oh, but I didn't know? They might let you off, but a lot of cops are not going to do that. At least that's not what I hear anyway. They're not going to do that. They're not going to let you off. You can say, oh, I didn't know. And they're like, well, you didn't know, but this is law, so here's your ticket. Enjoy your fine. When it comes down to it, Saul does have the right to make up this silly thing, and he does. And then he even has the right here to say, you've disobeyed my command, and you're going to die. Whoever it is going to die, even if it is my own son. So then verse 40, they divide the people. The people are let off the hook. And then it's just down to Saul and Jonathan. Saul and Jonathan are taken by lot, verse 41. Verse 42, then Jonathan is taken. And verse 43, we see Jonathan says, look, I transgressed, and Saul is going to execute Jonathan. Jonathan even says, look, I transgressed. I get it. I'm supposed to die. I understand. But then here's the interesting thing. This goes back to how terrible of a leader Saul is. All right? Now, if Saul meant what he said, what should he have done? He said, I'm going to kill my own son. If it's my own son, he's going to die. If he meant what he said, he should have done it. But Saul's so weak that the people stand up and, look, I'm glad they did. Now, don't get me wrong on this. They did the right thing, but Saul immediately caves. He's afraid of the people. And we're going to find out. He even blames the people later, and he's afraid of the people then. So Saul's not a good leader. He's first of all, he should have never made the vow, but he goes and he makes it, and then he never backs it up. All right, moving on to this last section. I'll make a little bit of application and move on here. Saul's fight against the enemies of Israel. This is kind of a summary of some things here. But verse 47 through 52, now when Saul had taken the kingdom over Israel, he fought against all the enemies on every side, against Moab, against the children of Ammon, against Edom, and against the kings of Zobah, and against the Philistines. And whithersoever he turned himself, he put them to the worse. And he did valiantly and smote the Amalekites and delivered Israel out of the hands of them that despoiled them. Now the sons of Saul were Jonathan and Ishvi and Malchishua, and the names of his two daughters were these: the name of the firstborn Merab, and the name of the younger Michal. And the name of Saul's wife was Ahinoam, and the daughter of Ahimaaz. And the name of the captain of hosts was Abner, the son of Ner, Saul's uncle. And Kish was the father of Saul. And Ner, the father of Abner, was the son of Abiel. And there was sore war against the Philistines all the days of Saul. And when Saul saw any mighty man or any valiant man, he took him unto him. All right, so in all this, you see some pretty clear things here. First of all, Saul is going to fight the enemies of Israel, and that's what it says. And as we see here, he's got a special little place in his heart for the Philistines, And every time that he can go after the Philistines, that's what he's going to do. He wants to fight the Philistines for some reason. Now, as you get on down to verse 50, Abner is the only official named here, probably because he's going to play a bigger role later on. You kind of get used to hearing his name. And then verse 52 says that he takes on anyone, basically, that looks strong and brave. Any mighty man is going to now be conscripted into the service of Saul, which, if you go back to 1 Samuel 8, verses 11 and 12, is just confirming things that they were already told. 1 Samuel 8, 11 and 12 says, "And he said, This will be the manner of the king that shall reign over you. He will take your sons and appoint them unto him for his chariots and to be his horsemen, and they shall run before his chariots, and he will appoint them unto him for captains of thousands and captains of fifties. And he will set some to plow his ground and to reap his harvest, and to make his instruments of war and the instruments of his chariots." And so this just confirms all the things that they were warned about from the beginning. Saul's now doing them. All right, let's make some application. I've only got 2 here, and just very, very quickly. The number one thing here is leaders lead. I have always thought that, I won't name any names, but I think you'll know where I'm getting at here. I've always had a very lack of respect for a certain president that said, "You know what, I lead from behind." Nobody leads from behind. Nobody. You don't do that. You lead from getting out in front. If you go back and you look throughout U.S. military history, these guys, all these great officers, you know what a lot of them did? They got into those positions. How? By getting out in front and leading the way. They weren't afraid, and they weren't sending people off to do their fighting. They said, "Come with me, boys, let's go." But that's not what Saul does here. Leaders lead. But you do see Jonathan doing this. Jonathan leads. But what happens when you don't have good leadership? Matthew 15 and verse 14. "Let them alone, they are blind guides, and if blind guide the blind, both shall fall into the pit." And so, you need good leadership. If you got people that are not leading, then you're going to have a problem. You're going to have blind guides. Here's another one, and this comes specifically from verses 31 through 35, when they were eating of the blood. Bad decisions can lead to sin. Bad decisions don't always lead to sin, but bad decisions can definitely lead to sin, especially when you're thinking about spiritual things. You've got to keep yourself from these situations. But what could have happened here? They were allowed the spoils of war, and if they were allowed to just eat a little bit as they were going, they would have conquered everybody really fast. That's the whole point. They would have gotten through everything really quickly, but they weren't allowed to do that. Saul had made this rash vow, and because of it, not only did they get weak, but what happens to so many people whenever you are really hungry and you get kind of past that point where you're like, "Oh man, I'm starving." They were just so hungry and they've been so overexerted that they get to the point where they just think, "You know what? We can eat these animals, and we can eat them without being cooked." Now, this is not good. But this is all because Saul, made bad decisions. He made some bad decisions. Proverbs 3, verses 5 and 6. "Trust in Jehovah with all thy heart. Lean not upon thine own understanding. In all thy ways acknowledge him, and he will direct thy paths." We need to go to the Word of God for these things. Make good decisions. Go and look up the things in Scriptures to help you with your decision making. Don't try to do it on your own. Your own understanding is not gonna get you there. You need God's knowledge. And then Proverbs 11 and verse 14. "Where no wise guidance is, the people falleth, but in the multitude of counselors there is safety." And so sometimes we need some guidance It would have been good for Saul to have thought about some of this stuff before he got going, and maybe had sought some counsel in some way. But no, he just makes a rash vow and goes with it. You know, that's something for us. It's not shameful for us to ask for help. You know, you've probably had a mentor or two in your lifetime. And what you need to do is you need to go and ask people that have already been there. Ask people that are wise. You know, don't go and do as some people we'll see later on do, where they go and ask their contemporaries, their peers, for help. No, you need to go to people who are wise. Go to people who are wise for help, and that's you'll make better decisions that way. So bad decisions can lead to sin. Go to God's Word so that you make good decisions. All right, the lesson is yours tonight. If you have not yet obeyed the gospel of Christ, we'd love to help you out with that, to be baptized tonight. If you have already become a Christian, but you have not been faithful, we'll be glad to pray for you. And this invitation is for you. Please come as we stand and as we sing. Why